All right. Welcome, everybody. It is 12:02. I know we have some folks still coming in, but in the interest of time, I want to welcome you all to our second Women in Architecture webinar of 2025. My name is Denise Bass, and I am a member of AIA Palm Beach, and I also sit on our Florida Women in Architecture Committee. Today's webinar is on the topic of wealth, specifically on investment and retirement tips and planning for longevity. AIA attendees will receive one LU credit. You do not need to put anything in the chat for attendance purposes. Staff can tell from your logging in. We do invite attendees to ask questions in the Q&A box. Please don't do it in the chat. We'll be monitoring the Q&A during the presentation, and Christina will be taking questions as she goes through the presentation, and we want this to be interactive. Our presenter today is Christina Worley, CPA, PFS, CFP, CFA. Christina is an accomplished financial services professional with more than 30 years of experience in wealth management, financial planning, and investment advisory services. She is a founder and managing member of Castle Wealth Management, a registered investment advisory firm managing more than 375 million in assets, an expert in financial analysis, portfolio management, and client relations, and passionate about community leadership and mentoring future generations of financial professionals. Christina presented for our local Palm Beach Women in Architecture group back in 2018, and we are honored to have her present for us today. Christina? I think you're muted.
I'm not muted.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Denise, for that kind introduction. It is nice to present to your organization again. I'm going to start off with asking if any of the women can put into the chat or raise their hand if they have a long-term financial plan. And then I'm going to start where we count up and see if you do. Ben Franklin started with a famous quote, "Failure to plan is planning to fail." And when we look at what we have in America now, what we have is about 38% of the Americans have a written financial plan. If you're educated and over $75,000 in income, it tends to go up to about 50% of the Americans have that plan. Women tend to be at only 15%. So women are totally under planning. And if anybody's seen the Gene Kranz quote from the Apollo 13 movie, failure is not an option. So if we don't have a plan and execute on it, a lot of times women are not actually prepared for retirement. So my personal goal in teaching this course today is inspire each of you to want your own written long-term financial plan. Why? Because many of the women I know and respect just do not prioritize themselves over their giving to their loved ones. And those are the women that actually need the most inspiration to take the time to focus on themselves. So can we look on the chat? Who's actually gone ahead and has a plan? Does anybody raise their hand?
Chrissy, do you have access for that?
Yes, it looks like there was upwards of probably like 6 people. Right now we have 3.
Oh, okay.
4 still ongoing there.
Okay, so in general, if we have, there were, I think 80 signed up for it. So, 15% we're a little bit under on here. So there's room for improvement here, ladies. So I'm going to stop the video and go to the slides as I start now, but I'll be able to have Denise present any questions. So frequently I feel with new clients, like I'm your flight attendant who tells you need to prioritize putting your own oxygen mask on before you put it on those you care for, so that you will be able to help them in the event of crisis. If you can't take care of yourself financially when you are no longer working, you may indeed become a real burden to your own children and family, or the government when your children can't afford to it. And believe me, besides people that plan for a Medicare preservation trust aside, who here thinks that being in the government care for 20 years with no options is a good idea? Why do you want to have a written long-term plan? And why do women need to prioritize their retirement even more than men? Because there's actually a documented gender gap between what men and women have a retirement. Women actually need to put a lot more effort into it than men. One of the best books I like is Carl Richards' book that says the one-page financial plan. One page is not too much to start with. There are many other books and many more detailed plans, but if you want a place to start, that's a really good resource for looking at what to put into a one-page plan. When setting up your plan, you need to think, I'm going through the slides a little too slow. I thought it had the, so I'll get quicker at this. When you're setting up your plan, I really want you to think of it as a spending plan for having the money that you need in retirement and not any kind of a budget. It makes it a lot more desirable to think about the outcome of having all the funds that you need in retirement, instead of thinking that you're in some way restricting your budgeting now. What you're really is planning for your future. And if you think about it that way, it will help you greatly get into the right frame of mind. So why do women need to save more than men, you may ask? You know, we're getting DEI out of absolutely everything that we see these days, but it's the same as women having different rates for insurance and other things. There's documented evidence of why we need to do it. So the biggest reason is that we live longer. So you need 7% more for your health care in retirement because women tend to take care of their husbands and they pass 7 years earlier. So there's no additional expenses needed for aids and things like that. But then the women need medical aids or need somebody to take care of them, and they actually live all those extra years. So you need 7% more in healthcare and retirement for the longevity that women have. Women also tend to invest more conservatively, either because they're risk averse or because they haven't had enough financial education to understand the risk return correlation. So that's something that we're going to talk about a little further on. But if you invest conservatively in the start of your savings and don't compound as much, that will affect your return as well. So women need to be educated to take a risk return reward perspective on what they're saving. Also, women still get paid less, especially white collar work, for doing the same amount of work as men. And we do tend to work 10 years less than men on work that saves into our retirement accounts. Women tend to work 28 years and men work 38 years. It's usually 10 years for childcare and taking care of parents or siblings. And usually when we take those years off, we don't put money in the retirement plans. So one of the things I'm going to bring up later is if you're taking off to take care of your parents, you should ask your parents if they'll at least make your retirement plan contributions while you're caring for them. It's but what does this mean for my savings? We kind of went through this, but save for retirement before saving for the kids' college. So, oh, I'm going back for a little bit. Excuse me about this. The old rule of thumb was to not let your student graduate with debt greater than 1 year of expected income based on their major. There's a recent Wall Street Journal article that said the best way to do this was to make sure your child graduates in just 4 years or less. Stop with these 5 and 6 year plans. Tell your children to take 15 credits per semester. Make sure they cover the core courses in the first 2 years, not electives. Tell your children what your school budget is for them. Florida has great state schools, and the bright features in a quick graduation can let them get a student graduate debt-free, and if they do it quickly. Seriously consider this versus any school that will cost you an arm and a leg, especially if your child doesn't even know what they want to major in. If you wait to save until your kids are out of school, consider this. If a 25-year-old woman saves $381 a month at 7%, she'll have $1 million by retirement age. The same woman waits until the kids graduate college and she's 55 to start at the same rate of return. She needs to save $5,778 a month. That will definitely affect your lifestyle. It really, the compounding is truly important, and you need to start. And you need to make sure that your kids' college doesn't interrupt your saver for retirement. I always feel that if you need to help your kids should have the debt on their own books. That way they make sure that they know what it costs and that they understand it. And if you're doing well later in life, help them pay it off. But if you have the debt on yours and they graduate and they are unable to, they may have a special needs child, or they may have anything come up in their life where they can't take care of you in your retirement, you've not set yourself up for your own success. So please, again, your retirement comes before your children's college. So in conjunction with that, there is also another topic that is usually not brought up with people in their financial planning process, but I personally have found that having your parents not have enough money to continue their retirement has ruined many of my clients' plans that they have. So when we go through the plans for them, lots of times their parents are from the silent generation and they don't understand that their parents may not have enough money. That generation doesn't talk about money. So I've had a couple of clients, and one client, they didn't know until their parent was 3 months away from not having any cash. And then they came to them and said, we put you through law school, time for you to support us. And that was a rude awakening when their children were in college and they were having problems with their law firm themselves and having their draw cut. So it's important to you as a daughter to go talk to your parents. Now, this is not something that we've really had good success with people. If you want to go talk to the silent generation, to make a meeting to talk to them about estate planning, or if they have enough assets, they don't want to really talk about it like that, and it will offend them generally. I have found that it's much more successful in my experience to relate to them with a story. So if you say something, and hopefully it's a true story, something that you can look for or relate to, and then say, Mom, my friend Carol was, not able to meet her retirement goals because all of a sudden, but her parents were in an accident, and then they had to pay for an aid for them for, what was supposed to be a month, but has now worked out to like 2 years. So, you can say, Mom, if something happens to you or Dad, do you have enough money, or do you have long-term care insurance, or what's your plan for if you need an aid in your home? And if you put it like that, it tends to be that they will relate to the story, and especially the mothers will be more accepting of a way as a bridge to open up that conversation and share with you what they're thinking or plans are. They may say something like, well, don't worry about us ever. We have more than enough. That's great. You get to go on with your plan. Then if she's saying, well, that could be a concern, well, then you probably need to delve a little deeper if you can, and say, like, do you think you'd have enough for an aid or something for a few months or a year? Or do you think that, this would maybe be something that would, pretty much hurt you financially so much that you needed help? So those kinds of conversations to have would be really important. That way you can make sure if you need to be talking to your siblings about saying, maybe we all need to be helping them a little bit now so that they have something, so that they don't run out, or maybe we need to give them financial guidance, or maybe, it just opens up a whole area that you need to think about if you are concerned that your parents may become, you're close to them and it may be something that you would be responsible for. It's better to bring them into the conversation early and have that discussion than find out that they were just like all the other parents that I've had with my clients, where they don't really say they're in trouble until it's very late into the trouble process. Another story you could bring up is having a healthcare surrogate form completed that gives you the ability to ask about medical or make decisions if they're in an accident or something happens. You do need to have a healthcare surrogate firm naming you. So that could also be a slower, milder way of asking about some of these questions, starting with that, and then go to the money issue. But the healthcare surrogate is pretty basic. It shouldn't be in a vault or anything. It should be handy so that, you know, if something happens on a weekend, you can go take it to the hospital and be able to help them and answer questions and have it handy. So let's make talk of investing more green. So I assumed that the ladies in this webinar are all going to be spatially aware and also visually motivated. So I didn't want to come out with only sad stories about things that you needed to do to depress everybody. I wanted to share with you that when I think about portfolio management, I'm playing with the buckets and what we need to do to accomplish our life's goal. I think of it a lot like gardening. I am a passionate gardener. It's easy in Florida. Orchids grow year-round here. And a lot of the portfolio management is very similar to building a beautiful garden. You plot a garden, which is putting together your financial plan. You prepare the ground, which is opening the right accounts and the right titles with the right institutions. You plant the correct seeds, which is buying the right stocks or asset classes in the right accounts. You water regularly, which for us in this instance would be putting regular deposits into the retirement accounts or saving yourself. You call deadheads, which is what we call rebalancing, where you sell some of what has gone up and you buy some of what has gone down, and that helps. That rebalancing will help you with almost 40 basis points a year of additional return if you do that yourself. And then at the end, the harvesting is taking your periodic distributions in retirement, harvesting what you saved your life for your own pleasure and retirement. So you get to enjoy the fruits of your hard work. So this is the page that we were going to make our first pause for questions. Do we have any questions, Denise?
Yes. Can you discuss the difference between the healthcare surrogate and power of attorney?
Sure. A healthcare surrogate answers your medical questions and gives you power to make medical decisions. A power of attorney is a legal document that lets you do exactly what the power of attorney says you can do in Florida. So in Florida, it used to be that people had broad ones, and then they went into made it so that they need to be specific. So in Florida, if you don't have a power enumerated in a power of attorney, the person can't do it. So for my own mom's as an example, I didn't have her in her power of attorney that I was able to open credit cards or close them or change the authorized signer or anything. And her aide got her credit card with my mom's stolen when they were visiting a public store. The purse got stolen. And I realized when I went to go cancel her credit card and get a new one, they asked for the power of attorney, and that wasn't specially enumerated in Florida. So I learned my lesson, and now I do advise all my clients to put in there, you know, you want to be able to open accounts and close accounts and do things for the people with a power of attorney. But in Florida, you also need to put using the credit card powers. Those things do vary by state. So I know this is a national organization, so you need to check your own state laws on what you can do. It used to be you could have a nice broad power that said you can do anything, including gifting, if you put that in there. But now a lot of them are state specific. So you can talk to a lawyer or figure out yourself what you need to do with the power of attorney. But it does, if it's if the person has it, they can, and it's a broad power and it lets you do things, it could let you sell a house. So you really don't want to give somebody a power of attorney for you unless you truly trust them. Lots of times people in Florida will do a power of attorney and then give it to a friend or lawyer so that they hold it, so that the child has to come to that person to get it, so that they go take out a mortgage on your house while you're still living there if they have credit card debt or something. There's been so many stories that you hear over the years of disasters from having a power of attorney to freely used. So you do need to be careful of who and how you give it to, but they're totally different documents and they're used for different purposes. However, healthcare surrogate is just for medical. You know, if they have an accident and you want to authorize a operation that might save them but might kill them, you know, your parents wouldn't want to be vegetables. They'd probably want you to authorize the surgery, but a lot of times if you don't have that power legally, the hospital won't let you do that. So it lets you protect your family in a way and gives you the legal authority to make healthcare decisions.
Okay. We have another question. If I am already 40 years old and haven't started to invest in my pension yet, how much do you recommend to save for pension per year?
Well, it depends. That's why a plan that shows you may be spending a great deal on lots of things. It's hard to know what your specifics are. That's why a one-page plan will get you with a calculator. You may have a hefty mortgage or you may have no mortgage. I can't tell how much you need in retirement to tell you how much you need to save for. So those are exact specific. There's some guides that are on some of the major sites that tell you what you need to save for compounding, but you really need to know what what your expenses are. So lots of times people, as a rough rule of thumb, will say that if you're only trying to do rough, like you're going to need 80% of what you're currently making now. If you're not saving anything now, you're probably spending what you make. So you're going to at least need to be at like 80% of what you're making now in retirement, so you can put how much that you need to save to get to that amount by the year that you want to retire, which for many people is 65, because that's when Medicare kicks in, and lots of times health insurance in your 60s is a couple $1,000s a month, and that's something many people wait until they're 65 so they don't have to cover that. But it's just math, but you need to know a little bit of numbers going in so you get a good, garbage in, garbage out. So if you want a good number, you need to do a little bit of back of the envelope calculations to figure out what you're going to need. Great question.
And Marjorie wants to know, does marital status trump a power of attorney?
Well, that's interesting. A lot of married people, a power of attorney, not a healthcare surrogate. Marital status, usually it depends on how you own property. So if you own a house jointly with your husband, yeah, he can't sell it without your signature on it. So if you, in general, yes, but many married people give each other a power of attorney for closing credit cards or doing other things that they want done, or especially if you have your own business on the side, like a lot of the women here are small business owners. So if you own property with your husband, he would be able to do things with it. But if you own your own business, he's not going to be able to do anything with that unless you have a power of attorney that gives him the ability to maybe sell your shares to a successor owner or things like that. So
yeah, I think she's saying medical specifically, but that'd probably be the healthcare surrogate.
Yeah, that would be the healthcare surrogate. Yeah, the healthcare surrogate, normally a spouse is able to do that, but not necessarily children. So, okay. Great questions, lady. So this is a little bit more complex. So modern portfolio theory is not really very modern at all. It's pretty old, but a lot of times people don't learn it with financial literacy in school. So 86% of your return over time is really dependent on what asset class you're in. It's, the stock selection or the timing, whether you get in or out of the market before you think it's going to go up or go down. In general, it's like 10% of your portfolio's return over the long term. The vast majority of how to get it right is just to get in the market and get in the right asset classes. So asset classes are things like large cap stocks, big cap or small cap, international emerging market stocks, bonds, and REITs. So when I talk about taking your money and putting it in asset classes to plot your plan, these are the classes that you get to choose of. And it's not, I want the slide in here so you guys realize it's really not picking the right stock per se, because that's only 10% of the return. It's really just being in the market. So when you go into the market, there's a couple different ways to go in. You can obviously buy just an individual stock, but this is geared for more basic. So this is like if you're just starting. So I was going to explain mutual funds and ETFs because they're the biggest way people can invest in their company retirement plans now, which is usually how most women start their savings. Lots of times younger people during COVID actually started Robinhood accounts. And so people in their 20s are actually trading more with stocks than people in their 40s and 50s, which is interesting as a society. But open-ended mutual funds are the old-fashioned from the 1940 Act, and you get to go in and out at the end of the day at 4 o'clock, they value, and you can do it. They do have higher expenses in general because they have to hold cash for people redeeming or people putting money in every day. They trade within the mutual fund because you give them cash, they have to go buy the stocks you're supposed to buy, or if you ask for cash, they have to take it out. So there's a lot more trading, there's a lot more paperwork, they have to send out proxies, and everybody gets them. Closed-end mutual funds trade like a stock throughout the day. They trade to other people instead of cashing in with the mutual fund company itself. Exchange traded funds are much more like closed-end mutual funds, but they are much more tax efficient and they have lower operating expense. They put together a bunch of funds, a bunch of indexes. They were mostly passive to start with in 1993, and you could buy them and invest in an index like the SPY is the spider, is the S&P Standard & Poor's 500. And that was one of the very first ones that was huge. So it lets you, instead of trading in with the company, cashing it in and having them trade and having all those costs and taxes associated with the stocks being bought and sold, you would sell your exchange traded share to another person. They pay you the whatever the cost is that it's traded out on the exchange. If it's $20, somebody else is buying it for $20 and you're selling it to them, but there's no trading inside the ETF, so the expenses were much lower. This was truly tax efficient for everybody, and it also let you trade throughout the day instead of waiting till 4 o'clock. So these became so popular. So if you open a brokerage account now, a lot of times people will find that it's mostly full of ETFs now instead of individual stocks or mutual funds. So within most people's 401k at their firms, you have fund families that are usually to choose from. There's some that are been known to be cheaper than others. Vanguard is really cheap because it's a mutual company, so nobody owns it. They're not paying profit to shareholders. So that's traditionally the lowest cost in the industry. DFA funds are usually in people's 401k. They're also pretty inexpensive, as are Fidelities and Schwabs and things like that. Fidelities will be more than Vanguard's because Fidelity is a for-profit, but Fidelity has more active funds. So these are some of the best companies to use when you look at what your choices are. I really think that you should have in your 401k like 10% each in US stocks, international equities, and fixed income. So that's 30%, and the rest is going to be based on your age and risk tolerance. So I put some in fixed income in case you ever need cash out of it, or in case the market drops a lot, you can take your fixed income and go back into equities and bounce back quicker. So it's really, if you're young, you should be primarily in equities. And if you're getting close to retirement, you should have more in bonds. So I can't tell you exactly what your asset allocation should be, but it should be in the range, and you should have one because that's basically how you get your return, is with your asset classes. These are just because people keep saying, can you give me an example? So I gave you 3 Vanguard stocks that are ETFs, I'm sorry, that have super low expense ratios. 0.3 basis points, that's 3/100ths of a percent for the cost for the total market index. And then the international stock index is 0.08, and also a short-term corporate bond fund. That bond fund is currently paying 4.8%, and it has a duration of 2.6. There's Schwab ones underneath it all. these are not to say that you need to buy these. These are, you can look at and compare them to what you see in your funds or what's available at your brokerage. If you're putting money into an IRA, what you could buy. These are just so that you have a starting point to look at some of the things that are sound. So it's not saying you should buy this per se, but these are good starting blocks to put together to save if you don't know where to go. You shouldn't, not knowing where to go makes some people not do anything, and that's a bad place to be. You should start saving and start investing. The sooner you start saving and investing, the sooner you start compounding, growing your assets for retirement. So you need to start, and these are just some places that I mean to start to help people along their way. And I think this was another pause spot for questions. So Denise, did anybody have any questions on the asset allocation, ETFs, or the Vanguard funds I mentioned?
No questions.
And I do want to tell everybody, I don't work for Vanguard. I have no vested interest in any of these. It's that this is just good to give you some foundational knowledge. Okay, we're going on to the next question. So behavioral finance. So everything I've told you about modern portfolio theory and how to save and its mathematics makes perfect sense for rational people. But Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002 when he started the field of behavioral finance, because he started doing research and he found out, lo and behold, investors are not actually rational. A lot of times they're emotional. So this was kind of a shock to the old-fashioned people that were the stock pickers in New York, that were assuming that everybody would be like the textbooks that we would get in college on portfolio theory. They always assumed everybody would optimize, and they didn't think that people would behave irrationally. And lo and behold, they do. So I'm going to go through some of the things that they learned on this, partly so that I can then teach you some of the things that people have found for you not to do, so that you have names and understand a little bit. So what they did is they took prospect theory, which they go and ask people, would you rather have $1,000 for sure, a 50% chance of 2,500, or a 50% chance of 0? Most choose the for sure $1,000. Mathematically, the correct answer would be to, if you have to do it repeatedly, would be to take the 50% chance, because it averages to $1,250, not $1,000. So then when you do this and the test the other way and say, okay, now you have a for sure loss of 1,000, or a 50% chance of not losing anything, or a 50% chance of losing 2,500, the people all wanted the lesser. They were really willing to engage in riskier behavior to avoid the sure loss. They wanted to take the bet that they paid 0 rather than just paying $1,000, 0 or have a $2,500 loss. So this has ramifications for how investors feel about up and down stock markets. People are more concerned with losses and gains. People prefer certainty, and many people process information in a logical way when valuing gains versus losses. You may realize this when you look at your statement when it comes in the mail, and just look at what went down instead of looking what went up. There's a lot of examples of what people do, and we'll get into some of them. But in behavioral finance, it's now broken more into two main types: emotional biases or issues, and behavioral ones. So we adapt the risk tolerance for these. So if people have lots of emotional issues with finance, we tend to look at what their risk tolerance should be to say what they need for retirement. And if they can't take any losses at all, or that's a real issue for them, we try to adapt their risk tolerance for these issues so that they stay in the market and don't panic. This is what a financial advisor's job is, to help you find the risk tolerance that lets you sleep at night while getting you to where you want to go. So there are a couple of ones that are really clear that I found with women, so I put them on the slide. Endowment bias. Now this one, I'll give you some examples. It's a lot of women that become widows they will come with a portfolio of stock and say, like, my husband picked these and we want to keep them forever. Well, a lot of them, their husband kept them forever because they thought they'd get a step up on basis. And he was a wise financial man and wasn't going to sell them with capital gains like 6 months before he was going to pass with pancreatic cancer or something. The husband didn't really want you to keep those stocks. What the husband wanted is you to be financially set for life and to be secure. So endowment bias, we try to get out of for clients by saying, well, if your husband had just left you cash, how would we invest it? And we would come up with a nice portfolio that wouldn't be too volatile and would give them the income that they need. But the endowment, in fact, a lot of people try to put emotional attachments into financial instruments, and you need to realize that they are really financial instruments. There's a lot of stocks that have gone down over time. If you stayed in the original Dow Jones 30, I don't think any of them are still in the Dow Jones. So, I mean, actually, I think Exxon maybe, but I mean, those things change over time, and you have to be open to realizing that this is financial security. It's not an attachment. It's not a dog, it's a stock. So this is a popular one that I truly try to educate women on. Overconfidence bias. This is another one where a woman may have one industry that she knows really well. She may work for a medical pharmaceutical company or something, and she may really understand that business. So she wants almost all of her stocks in that business because she understands it. She may not be diversifying properly, and she may be overconfident that she knows what the next big thing is, when healthcare stocks may be just taking a tank in general, and she should have been diversified into other things. So overconfidence, honestly, men usually are more overconfident than women, but it is a bias if you have a strong industry knowledge and you want to try to keep all of your stocks in that industry versus having a diversified portfolio. And loss aversion bias is another one where people don't want to sell their losers. This is actually, if you think about it, if you've ever paid a lot of money for a ticket to the theater or something, and then you realize that it just is horrible, and then you don't want to go home because you put $150 into the ticket. So it's a sunk fallacy cost. There are people that don't ever want to sell their losers until they've made back their money. And that is not necessarily a good outcome. You may hold them forever, and where if you reallocated the money and looked at it like, what's going to make me the most money going forward this year, rather than I can't sell this until it comes back to what it was, it may never come back and you may never diversify. So these are things that your financial advisor should be helping you understand better. If you are a long-term investor and they're diversified, you should always have positions that decline on a short-term basis. That's what lets you buy them low, and rebalancing gives you about 40 basis points over annually. So it helps you, sell what's down or sell what's up, buy what's down, and that's will help you, and don't become overly attached. So I'm going to speed up a tiny bit and just go over a few of these. These are ones that you can look up. One over-end diversification is also called naive diversification. They found out when people went to go put money in their 401ks, if it had 10 funds that you could pick, people would put 1/10 in each of them. And that wasn't, when they realized they used to have like 5 bonds and 5 stocks, and people were all 50-50, and they weren't in enough equities for their younger people. So then they started having more equity funds. So you'd have 7 equities, 3 bond funds, so that people would not do one over-end diversification. But if you realize that that's something, you know not to do it. You want to look at how much you want in equities, how much you want to bonds, and pick the funds that have low expenses or better performance than average if they're active, and invest your 401ks that way. Don't ever just go, I want to, divide by the number of funds there are and put something in everything. That doesn't match how you need to think about the market long term. I'm going to let you ask me questions about any of these other ones that you wish, and I'm going to move on a little bit to concrete ideas. So some of these are pretty obvious. Match a 401k match is free money, or a simple IRA if your employer does that. Take all you can get. If they give you a 3% match, you should at least be putting the 3% in. If you're trying to save, 18% and they match 6, then you really only need 12 to get where you want to go. So for Ben Franklin, another one of his good quotes, a penny saved is a penny earned. 1% higher return or lower expenses during the long accumulation stage can bring an additional 10 years of retirement withdrawals. So DFA funds used to teach everybody that passive was a bad word. Everybody wanted active. They want like a Fitbit. They want their funds to be active because it sounds like they're doing something. But passive investing was really just kind of evidence-based. Like you could be in an index and have low turnover and low expenses, and it compounded nicely over time. If you look at what Warren Buffett's told his wife to do when he got upset, he's told her to sell everything and put it in the SPY, exchange traded fund, and not let an advisor talk her out of going into, hedge funds or all kinds of stuff, just to put it in a passive and let it grow. Einstein said, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. So who doesn't love to quote Einstein? The rule of 72 will tell you that 7.2 doubles in 10 years and 10% doubles in 7.2 years. And you can extrapolate what you need to know for how much you need by some of those rules of thumb. So these are some more of the biases. We're going to do just this page, and then we'll take a pause for them. And if you want to talk about any of them, conservatism bias. You don't revise your belief when presented with new evidence, especially if it's too hard to interpret. So, you've heard in the past that something's good and you just stick with it, even if you found that it really isn't good anymore. It takes a lot more than hearing about it 1 or 2 times for you to reevaluate your impression of whether that's a good investment or not. Confirmation bias is you only search for and recall information that confirms what you know. So you may think
Christina,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. We're not seeing anything on the screen. I wasn't sure if you meant to share something. Thank you.
It went to the next slide. I'm sorry, but I'll just talk over it and then I'll start on this one. I apologize. Illusion of control bias, which is overestimate your ability to control events, results in trading too much and not diversifying enough. If you only own somebody like stock in Enron or Twitter or something like that, a lot of people think they know their company really well and they overstock in their own company. A representativeness is something that's a bias where it's called gambler's fallacy as well. It's a law of small numbers, which is you take mental shortcuts like following a story. If X and Y, like if it's a green company, it must be good. So those things don't tend to work out long term. Hindsight bias is, I knew it all along. So lots of times people ask what's going to come up with the market in the next 6 months or 1 year, and it's impossible to tell. I mean, anybody that thinks they have a crystal ball and can say for sure is not, and with confidence, there isn't 100% confidence that anybody knows for sure what's going to happen. So well, lots of times when you look back on it, you say, oh, that should have been like, everybody should have known that. And that would have been a normal guess, when actually staying in the market in some of those years, like 23, people thought the market was going to go down and it went up. Same with 24, they thought there was going to be a recession and it went up. So staying in the market sometimes is harder than it looks when you have the experts saying that things aren't going to necessarily work out. So hindsight bias is when you look back on something, you say, well, of course I should have figured it went up when all the experts weren't thinking it was going to actually go up. So those are, if you take into account that you're not 100% right all the time, and do diversify and do things to make sure that you are taking into account the unknowns, you will do better over time. And then some more concrete ideas. So saving enough. By retirement, if your goal is to budget living expenses of 4 to 6%, if you have $1 million, that's 40 to 60,000 a year withdrawal rates. So withdrawal from your accounts with income tax efficiency is your guide to which to spend from. So that's kind of like, do you need $120,000 a year? Well, you probably need $2 million for saved by the time you retire. Maximizing your company retirement plans. I was going to share with you an employer fire 401k this year is 23.5 you can put away. If you're 50 to 59, you can put an additional 7,500 in for catch up. If you're 60 to 63, and this is very arcane or a small bit of trivia, but you get to put 11,250 extra in this year. They're doing a special catch up for people in the 60 to 63 age group. Regular IRAs, if you don't have any company plans, you can always do one of these or help your kids do one of them if you're trying to get them started on the path. It's 7,000 if you're under 50 and 8,000 over if you're over 50. If you own your own firm, you can set up simple IRAs, which are indeed, as the word says, simple, and they let you save a lot more than a regular IRA. Simple IRA is 16,500. If you're greater than 50, you get to do 3,500 more as a catch up. And if you're 60 to 63, it's 5,250 more as a catch up. They have these wonderful inventions that aren't that well known called solo 401k plan. So if you own your own business and it's just you and your spouse, you can actually put almost $70,000 a year away into a retirement plan. So that helps you catch up really quickly. It's the 23,500 as an employee, plus the catch up, plus 25% of compensation up to $350,000. You can do those. They have them at Schwab and other places where you don't have to have an actuary or anything else, or 5,500 for reporting until it's 250,000 of saved up in the plans. So those are great ways to start planning and getting an income tax deduction for putting the money away for retirement. And remember again, 1% higher return through lower expenses or higher gross returns during a long accumulation period can get you 10 years more in retirement annual living expenses. Another thing is Social Security. Basically, your payment that you get for Social Security goes up 8% a year. Every year you don't take it. That's a guaranteed 8%. Well, providing the government's still going to keep paying Social Security, which most of us bet that it is. So if you can wait those first few years from 65 to 70 before you take it, you do get a much bigger payment. Now, you need to usually live to around 84 years old until it break even. It makes more with getting bigger payments versus getting them early. So if you have a severely debilitating medical condition, you should always take it soon and early. But if you are in great health and your parents live to be in their 90s, you might want to consider deferring taking Social Security until you're 70.
I have one question, Christina.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. This came in like 2 slides ago, so you might have covered it already. But the question is, I've tried to invest in green or otherwise stocks that I can feel good about. They have performed, but I wonder if I'm setting myself up for failure by limiting my investments in this way.
That people have with their funds, they put money in them for moral reasons to feel good about it. They did tend to underperform for decades, but part of that was because it was they have what they excluded. So they didn't have any oil companies and things when some of those did well. So it's the same thing but they had with the major pension plans. When the major pension companies and the big like the state pension plans had some DEI initiatives, and then they couldn't get the investment returns to be the same as they would if they just went into a passive fund without DEI. It made it a real issue with, are you investing as a fiduciary to make the best return for the people whose pensions you're paying, or can you take these other things into account? So they didn't decide it totally. It's still partially a legal issue on whether fiduciaries can look at the fact that they don't tend to outperform they tend to underperform, but it's usually by less than 1%. So if you want those things to feel good about yourself and to feel good about your investments, I would say you should invest in them. You may have to invest a little bit more, or it may be that the time will come and they will start paying off, but they have historically slightly underperformed over time. I hope that answers your question. We have this page. I wanted to make sure that you all were aware that the insurance plans from the AIA has a disability plan and a few other insurance plans that your association would be happy to share with you. Make sure that you have term life insurance until your kids get out of college. If some people will want whole life, which is a lot more expensive, but term life insurance will at least cover having some amount of insurance until your children are in college or out of college. Always have health insurance no matter what. If you lose your job, get the short-term insurance. I've seen, and statistically, people get bankrupt for not having medical insurance and they're in a car accident or something happens, and it's not hard to get $100,000 medical bill. It's like a week in the hospital. So always make sure that no matter what, those cheap policies for a month are only a couple $100. You should always make sure that you have something so that you don't have $100,000 to $1 million hospital bill for a period when you don't have insurance from your employer for a weekend if you're switching jobs or whatever. If you have children, you do need a will, if only to name the guardian, and you don't need to make the guardian the money and the guardian of the child the same person. I found it usually works better if it's a different person, because then the guardian of the child has to go to the guardian of the money for cash. I had one instance where a client took the money that they were guardian for a child and bought a bigger house so the child would have a bedroom, but they took all the money out of the account so that when the child finished college, they had nothing, and the parents that cared for them had a bigger house. So if you had a guardian of the money and a guardian of the child, they would probably give you some kind of rent adjustment or something for the years that the child was there, instead of letting them empty their account to build a bigger house. So those things, checks and balances. If you have parents or yourself, if you have a revocable trust, it saves probate. But you do need to make sure that the assets that your parents or you have are actually titled in the name of the trust, or it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't save probate. It may pour over from your will, but it won't save probate unless the assets are titled in there. If you're taking care of parents or siblings, have them contribute to your retirement account in those years where you're caring for them and not making a salary is quite helpful.
I have an IRA question for you.
Shoot.
Okay.
And I was supposed to pause at the end of that page.
What is the advantage of contributing to a SEP IRA as opposed to a traditional IRA? I am self-employed and have been funding my traditional IRA for the past 10 years. Should I switch to a SEP IRA instead?
It depends on how much money you want to put away. It's SEP IRA lets you put 25% of your salary away. It depends on what your salary is. A simple lets you put the 16,500. So if you only want to put 16,500, a simple is easier because you put the first dollar away. A SEP is, if you want to put 20,000 away, that's $80,000 of salary that you're going to have to pay taxes on, basically. Or if it's 100, you get 25%. So the plans look at how much you want to put away, what's the cheapest way of doing it, but you're not allowed to pick every year. You should look at it overall, what you're going to do for the next few years, and then pick that plan. But you can end this up and it'll roll eventually into a regular IRA and come up with a simpler 401k. I is individual or solo. So those let you put the most away. So it depends how much you want to put away. But it's a great question. The next question is, should I have an advisor? So they've done studies, and if you can do all this yourself, you save the 1%, and you learn skills, and it's valuable knowledge, and you can teach your children, and it's a good thing. If you don't do it, if you haven't done it yet, and you don't have somebody helping you do it, paying the 1% is a great thing to do. They've done a Vanguard study, and Michael Pisces did it, summarized it. I can send it to anybody. It shows that advisors usually add like 3% of value to somebody in terms of giving them tax information, giving them how to say probate, giving them how to, withdraw without paying the most in taxes. There's a slew of ways that an advisor can give you good advice that saves you money. If you can do it yourself, you save the money. It's a great thing to do. If you don't, you should hire somebody. Questions to ask an advisor that you're interviewing, and you should interview a couple, not just pick Joe because Sam said to pick Joe, but are you a fiduciary? That means they put your interest first before making a commission. 2 is how are you paid and what is your fee? 3 is, do you charge commissions on trades, or does your custodian charge it in addition to any management fees they're charging? 4 would be, does your firm practice active or passive investing? 5 would be, do you sell insurance or annuities? Just to find out for you to be aware of a conflict of interest. And how often do you review my portfolio? If they're never going to look at it after they sell you it, that's not somebody that you need to keep paying annual management fees are. Annual management fees and should be doing something consistently over time. We're almost at the end. So what's up with this 1,000? There's like 100 advisor credentials. Some of them are really worthless, but people advertise them like they're wonderful. So you should look up on the site that I mentioned it's in the slides, what the advisor info at sec.gov to check up anybody that you're thinking of hire. And a CFP, a CFA, CPAs, IOs, CMAs, CMFCs, those are all pretty, people are doing at least 4 years of college, then they're doing work experience, and there's testing involved and continuing education involved. Some of them, it's like a week and you pay a fee, and it doesn't really let you do anything besides put something on your business card. You should always look up on the website what that person was required to do to get that designation. And if it wasn't anything, then don't give the designation any weight in letting them give you advice. And I think that is the end. I'm going to ask you, did anybody get inspired to make a plan? If you can put your hand up, I will feel really good if I inspired at least one person to come up and think a little bit about prioritizing their retirement and how they were going to get there. And I will stay on if you guys want, if there's any questions, or my emails. The firm website is here, or Dean's going to give you my email if you have anything that you want to ask me that I didn't address. I realize it's 1 o'clock. So Denise has raised your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Christina. We don't have any other questions.
Great.
So, but yes, please, here is Christina's information. And if you want to reach out to me or to Christy, we're happy to share Christina's email with you as well, so you can reach out to her directly. Thank you so much. You've definitely inspired me. I do have a retirement account, but I do need to start planning for all these trips I want to take when I retire. So I need to make sure I have a list of how much money I want to spend.
Sounds great. Well, thank you and the Institute, and I hope that you all learn a little something and get inspired to save a little.
Yes, thank you. There's been some questions popping in. This session is being recorded and it will be available. Chrissy, how do we get a copy of it?
We will, when it posts a recording, we will then post it on the Women in Architecture page on our website. So when you go there, we have previous recordings as well that you're able to repeat. And someone is asking, will you share this PowerPoint? Is that something that you would be interested in doing, Christina? If so, I can talk with you about that offline and share with others.
I'm fine with that. I mean, it's in the webinar, right, that you recorded?
Right,
Yes.
it is in the webinar.
Would you, they want, I can just give it to you so that you can, it's 20 pages. Let's send the 20 pages. Is that what you prefer? Okay, I'll find, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah, we can share it as a PDF.
yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much again. I do want to remind everybody that our March webinar will be on component leaders presenting their work. We will have registration information in Friday Facts this week. And thank you again, Christina. This was really amazing. And we did cover it in 2018, but thank you for the reminder.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Christina, you can go backstage too if you have any questions.
Oh, I'm going to, well, hold on a second. Cancel.